All right, let's do this. Happy Thursday, everyone. Thank you for taking a little break from the chaos and the news of the day. Let's focus on building decarbonization, shall we? This morning, Building Decarbonization Coalition Presents is from Ready Kilowatt to Gumby Kilowatt, and I think it's all the distraction that we need. Thank you, Tanya, for joining us. I think she has a wonderful presentation lined up for us. You're really going to enjoy it. Before I turn it over to Tanya, I'm just going to tell you briefly about the Building Decarbonization Coalition. I think we have a few newbies today, so thank you to our faithful members and for the new ones joining us this morning. The Building Decarbonization Coalition is made up of over 160 members. We're thrilled to see the coalition growing, and we're grateful to all of you for your support and your faith in us. If you're not a member yet, please join us. We have the best membership in the world. We have great events. We have a great leader in Panama. My name is Ashley Spurgeon. I'm your operations manager. We've got just a wonderful team, and we're doing some really exciting projects. And if you're not a part of it, you really need to be. So the Building Decarbonization Coalition released a roadmap in January of 2019. And in this roadmap, we laid out 5 overarching goals. The first was to build customer, builder, contractor, and policymaker awareness and interest in building decarbonization. The second was to ensure that customers receive a better value proposition from building decarbonization measures. The third was to ensure that building decarbonization provides better incentive for builders and contractors than fossil fuel heating. The fourth was to prepare supply chains and ensure delivery agents are ready to meet the rising demand for carbon-free building technologies. And the fifth was to align our policy goals to meet our other goals. And this webinar series that we put on every month, sometimes twice a month, really relates to this first goal about building awareness and interest in decarbonization. So every month, or sometimes twice a month, we get together the top doers, thinkers, and disruptors in the field of decarbonization, and we put on these webinars. And we were putting on webinars long before it was cool to put on webinars. And we have great turnout. We've got over 100 people registered today. Sometimes we top out our 250 cap for registration, and we all get together and we have a great time. So we've got another one coming up in our series in December. Is going to be focused on the Building Electrification Technology Roadmap with NBI. So you won't want to miss that. You can find out about all of our upcoming events on our website. And then, because we weren't doing enough, we decided to host a weekly webinar series focused on the CPUC gas transition proceeding webinar series. And that's being led by my colleague, Michelle. And we've had 3 in that series so far. We've got more coming up all throughout the month of November and December. And if you're not registered for those yet, you need to be, and you can register for those on our website. If you have any questions about membership or about our upcoming events, please reach out to me. My email is ashley@buildingdecarb.org. I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. So before we get started, here are a few webinar logistics. You're all muted. Like I said, we have great turnout for these webinars, and it just gets too unruly to have it any other way. So you're all muted. We're going to ask that you type all of your questions into chat, and then I will moderate your questions to Tanya. She has great opportunity for you to ask your questions and to get some dialogue going. The webinar is being recorded, so don't say or type anything that you don't want recorded. And then the members of the coalition can access the recording through our member portal on our dashboard. This is just one of the many great benefits of being a member. So this is my last pitch for membership. If you're not a member, you really need to be. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tanya to start sharing.
Great, thank you. Thanks everybody for showing up today. I know we're all doom scrolling through social media and the news feed. I think yesterday I refreshed the New York Times every 5 minutes all day long. So I get it. It's hard to move our focus around. I just want to say too, though, what Ashley was saying about joining BDC, this is one of the highlights of my inbox. There's such a huge breadth and depth of expertise, like a really profound amount of both technical, policy, commercial, mechanical, IT. It's a really amazing community of people. And if you have a question about building decarbonization, about the cutting edge of policy, it's like anything I've ever asked, it's like a magic genie who grants my wish. So I just want to say thank you for this amazing forum and for giving me a chance to present. So I know some of the other presenters, those of you who have been on other calls know that you can get the gamut. It can be very policy focused or it can be very commercially focused. Today, my presentation, I know some of you from more policy, community work based on my history at PECI and some of the energy resiliency planning work I've been doing with local communities for the past several years. This presentation today is more about energy flexibility in buildings, grid interactive, efficient buildings. What my particular vision is for a good starting point that will give us the kind of price point, the kind of value package, and the kind of approach we can take as we reach out to a really core and often left behind dynamic. So as you hear this, I'm going to be talking about one specific market entry path that we're looking to take and how we'd love to partner with some of you to get there. But I think that these types of technologies and approaches can apply to more than just the area that we're looking at. Obviously, there are some of you on this call that are already appealing to residential users, working with large commercial or others. So I hope that this stimulates some dialogue. I'm going to take about 10 minutes to present on the idea. I then have a slide with some more barriers to implementation or opportunities for us to advance this particular type of grid interactive efficient building concept. And then I thought we would leave it open for discussion and question and answer. So without further ado, I will get started. So I'm Tanya Barham with Community Energy Labs, and I'm hoping to bring to market the first truly scalable AI-powered clean building control system. Obviously, I'm preaching to the choir a little bit on this call. We know that 1/10 of US greenhouse gas emissions come from direct combustion of gas in buildings. 93% of commercial buildings use fossil fuels to heat water and air. So communities worldwide are, as they should be, and all of us are part of this push, are pushing buildings to convert to electric, operate efficiently even while they're increasing their loads, and consume power when renewables are making it. So CEL's AI-powered clean building control was purpose-built to enable this complicated change in a simple way, not just for the largest and the wealthiest building owners, but for your local school, your community church, or your city hall as well. So getting carbon out of building energy use is not as simple as it sounds. So my history is that I've also worked on the utility power supply side and the transmission distribution and building control side. So getting these two to be friends, you know, we all know about the duck curve. How do we make sure that we don't turn the duck curve into the giraffe curve? That's kind of what I'm talking about today. So getting carbon out of building energy use is just not as simple as it sounds. The blue curve here is when and how much energy a building is using. These icons are representing systems that drive energy use. In the morning, the AC comes on, water is heating, and a car is charging. In the afternoon, the AC is working extra hard because people are opening doors, they're letting out cold air. The shape of building energy use is important for a lot of reasons, but I think at the very highest level, and maybe an oversimplification, is that it's important because what climate laws are trying to accomplish is to get a building's energy shape to line up with this. This green line represents when renewables, in this case solar, are making power. And as we not only decarbonize buildings, but we decarbonize the electrical supply, we need to get any energy that we want to use to fall more or less under these curves. And any energy use outside of this curve is otherwise going to have to come from fossil fuels. Now, the way that these particular energy use and renewable curves look is going to vary based on the system, based on the building, etc. But in essence, this is what we're trying to do, get these things to match up. So decarbonizing buildings and better optimizing energy use for increased efficiency, electrifying buildings, this is already on the radar for a lot of entities. I just saw a great presentation from JLL, Salesforce, the US Green Building Council. I know MBI is a member, very committed to net zero. And not just net zero in the aggregate, but in real time. But that $269 billion market by 2028 is primarily right now being served by some very large players who are scrambling to help wealthy commercial businesses like Google or large Class A commercial buildings deploy millions for energy analytics and upgrades. It's awesome. I love it. I want to support it. We also have a lot of solutions that are trying to work on the residential side. But all electric building decarbonization is coming for everyone. CEL aims to help municipal, university, schools, and tribal governments who must meet their goals without the ability to pay lots of cash up front. So our extensive work with and sympathy for this segment's struggle to affordably decarbonize is really what sets our team apart in this mid-sized market that has ambitious building codes. By enabling lower upfront cost and faster returns, we believe that's an important component of any product offering for this portion of the market. We can make building optimization affordable and accessible for all building owners. So I will just say though too that that said, I think we're looking to partner. So we personally have at CEL have MOUs with Schneider Electric and are exploring strategic partnerships with like Honeywell and Siemens that could bring the innovation to the bigger market, but really we're focused on the biggest pain point right now. And this is why I think that the middle market is the right place to focus at the moment. In over 100 customer interviews, my team and I talked to building owners and operators at this middle market. And, you know, many of the municipalities that are passing aggressive building codes are often begin by requiring their own facilities be the first to comply with the targets that they've set. Just like the state of California's plan to decarbonize half of its, to go to net zero with half of its municipal buildings by 2025. But when we talked to the people, the facilities managers, the superintendent, school superintendent of business who are managing these portfolios, even though they make up more than half of the commercial floor space in the US, the middle market is literally still wrestling with spreadsheets and fiddling with thermostats to try to solve this problem. Like they're excited if they've got a wireless Pelican thermostat. There's almost no optimization. Those that have building controls are using very simple systems. So if you're a California school superintendent, you might be paying $3 million per year for energy per school, but upgrades needed to save money could cost $3 million up front, require extensive install, and take years to pay back. So we're proposing an IoT and software as a service control platform. Again, this is a idea stage, proof of concept stage, but we're trying to find something that's the right amount of intelligence and affordability and an approach in a market that could work and that needs it. So an IoT and software as a service control platform for building owners who find it complex, frustrating, and very expensive to meet new building energy goals. So the idea is we would install wireless sensors, equipment controllers, and use cloud-based software powered by machine learning to autonomously predict and efficiently control how and when existing building equipment is operating, so that more of it's powered by renewables. In doing so, we can offer building owners higher level of energy savings through greater efficiency, through reducing demand charges, lower carbon and upfront costs by better matching their loads and better self-consuming their solar if they have it, and faster returns than competitors who require a lot of equipment retrofits in order to achieve those savings. The idea is that after we charge that one-time fee for a one-day install, the occupancy sensors and controllers would be retrofitted to existing equipment, or in some cases could be added to the control logic of a new system on install, connect and control the devices through a hub, which is the nervous system that then sends data to the cloud and that later receives updated control logic from the cloud. So that's kind of how that would work. Now, once it's installed, a building owner selects operating preferences and goals like reducing greenhouse gases or saving money. I thought it was really interesting to watch Karen Herter's update on the load management proceeding for the California Energy Commission and see that by 2024, we will actually have grid signals that should enable this kind of automated control that have both time of use pricing, dynamic pricing, congestion pricing, and GHG, allowing a user then to say, my top preference is to save carbon, but I also want to save money, or my top preference is to save money, but next up is saving the planet. So the user can select this, and then we would charge a fee to monitor, predict, and control energy within those preferences using machine learning. With an average savings of 10 to 25%, the local school would pay back its investment in under 2 months. Our algorithm then updates the control logic on the hub, which orchestrates and autonomously controls the equipment in real time or 15-minute increments. And that combination of data plus machine learning leads to deeper insights over time into how a building, equipment, and occupants interact, while also being able to respond to those grid or energy pricing signals. How this works is complex, but to avoid turning this into a lecture on non-parametric, nonlinear building models, I'd be happy to answer questions about that, what differentiates our technology during Q&A. So let's take a look at how this works, do a really quick demo. Kim is the superintendent for a K-12 school district in California. Her board mandated all facilities be carbon neutral by 2025, so what are her options? We already talked about the big guys that cost millions upfront, take months to install, and without custom analytics, don't reduce carbon. But what most middle market customers have is no automation and analytics. It's just a bunch of little stuff, some of which might be in a demand response program, but that's a utility signal. That's not necessarily set up to meet their portfolio objectives with their buildings. So great. CEL offers an alternative. We know that the price is right. It could save a lot of money, but whatever Kim decides, she needs Glenn, her facility manager, to be able to use. And Glenn's got like only 3 staff, one of which is a janitor, groundskeeper. Glenn is like, don't send me texts at 10 p.m. I need something that's going to be just stupid easy to use and more or less autonomous. I want to operate things more efficiently, and I don't want to have to get an energy bill at the end of the month that's high and then go back and try to figure out what exactly happened. Just take care of it, give me faith that it works, and let me off the hook. Here's what that'll look like. So once the IoT hub is connected, the installer walks Glenn through an easy setup. This is just like when your cable modem or your cell phone gets set up. You've got a piece of hardware, you have a technician that helps you set it up. They connect your plan, bada boom, bada bing. They help you with your early setup of your email or your firewall settings. And now we're off to the races. So they say, well, Glenn, what do you want to monitor? Lighting, control electric vehicle charging, electric water heat, and I want to monitor my solar. Great. Glenn, tell the AI what to optimize. It's as simple as a click of the button. In this case, we're going to reduce carbon. So what you're seeing here is a live demo. If you can see this, we're going to have some interactivity here. I can give you all the link, and while we're doing Q&A, you can be turning my light on and off. This is a live demo with real operational data, logic, and control. So well, let's look at tomorrow. Kim and Glenn see a daily forecast or an historical record of what the AI is doing in real time in order to reduce carbon and save money. So remember when I told you about renewables curves? Well, this green line here is the live renewable energy forecast for tomorrow from California, from the MP15 region of the California grid, from the CAISO. But this just as soon could come off of the PV array that's on the rooftop. So we can take this feed from either. The blue line is output from our AI engine that's predicting how much energy the building will use tomorrow based on historical usage. Glenn can then see how the building is going to be run tomorrow by the controls and what control decisions the AI is making at any given minute and why. And he can override that control if he wants, or keep control off and then enable it later, because none of us have time to wait around all day and see how this works. I'll show you by replaying the day, and you can see how the algorithm controlled one building system, lighting, in relation to 2 inputs, occupancy and renewables. So it's midnight here. You can see my light is off. If we go to midnight down here on the demonstration, you can see that solar is off, so everything else is off. That makes sense. Now it's 6 in the morning, and we can see that lighting is optimized because occupancy is medium and high in the building, but solar energy is not high. So the light is now on, it's dimmed. And a little later in the day, we can see that the light is now all the way to its max capacity and solar is to its max capacity. So this is an oversimplification of how this logic works, but this is in a nutshell what it's doing. It's managing loads based on the user's objective, which is to increase self-consumption and reduce carbon. And so we're seeing that relationship there, and it's a day ahead. All right. So Kim and Glenn typify the building operators and experts that we talked to that said they want cheaper, simpler, smarter, and autonomous controls. Fortunately, our team has a large network and a long track record of working through energy providers and trade allies with commercial customers in states like California and Washington, which, as we all know, are among the most progressive in adopting not only building energy management codes, but load standards and appliance standards. We've already secured a couple early pilots in Washington and California. We'll be able to say more about those in the next month, but we're looking at 400 schools and about 277 commercial customers over the next 5 years, where we're hoping to be able to implement these algorithms and make sure that they don't overfit, that they're translatable between a number of different middle market commercial types, and that we can in fact offer them at the prices that we anticipate would be affordable for this market. So our intention is to keep working through energy providers, channel partners, allies, trade associates, directly with facilities managers and superintendents, and do at least 13 more collaborations of this size in order to really prove out the model. Our team has decades of experience scaling software, AI, and wireless systems for energy innovations in the middle market. We've commercialized a national solar schools program, HVAC optimization software, and microgrid controls from R&D to global scale for startups and companies as large as SoCal Edison and Southern Company on behalf of commercial customers and trade allies. As our founder, I have personally been dedicated to scaling social and environmental impact since the early 2000s for schools, commercial building owners, and communities. My passion is in taking energy innovations and making them affordable and accessible for wider demographics, more equity, and bigger impact. My team and I are really lucky to be able to count on the support and wisdom of a diverse set of industry leaders to shape our efforts, and to be a member of groups like BDC, which offer a lot of guidance and expertise when, we're looking like you for that path forward to really innovate and to be at the bleeding edge. So none of us wants to live through another summer like the one we just had. Many of you are looking for tangible ways to solve climate change. If you have a passion for building decarbonization and flexibility, we are looking for pilot partners, advisors, and we're looking for $2 million in grant funds and catalytic capital to help build our team and to help our pilot partners in these first 700 locations to be able to implement these technologies. So we're looking to try and expand and bring this to market. But I will leave you with this thought before we start our discussion. Beyond economic and climate impact, buildings are part of the very fabric of human life. Now more than ever, we spend most of our lives in buildings. Our children are playing in buildings. Our parents are aging in buildings. Software and machine learning have revolutionized nearly every aspect of our lives, and they have the power to positively transform our built environment. So I hope that you'll join us in harnessing their potential for good in the fight against climate change. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tanya. Okay, guys, give us your questions.
I'll also say here, before questions start coming in, I did put a slide where I think generally in the ecosystem where we could advance solutions like not just this, but the Ohm Connects of the world, the auto grids, the battery companies, the hybrid projects. There are a few things that I think could really help progress this behind the meter building decarbonization technology segment. And I'd love to hear other people's thoughts on that, but enabling automation does require some open standards. You know, what would we do if we couldn't all take a USB key and put it in every single USB receptor and have it work? We need those standards to enable open access and open markets. So open standards for data, for controls, for communications. Those are important. If we didn't have TCP/IP, none of our computers could talk to each other on the internet. Enabling dynamic pricing along with that automation and testing that out early in programs so that customers have a way to recover some of the value of this automation. Packages of devices segmented by groups of users that can demonstrate reliable flexibility in a variety of use cases. So I talked about that a little bit, but not just demand reduction for critical peak pricing like we currently have, but also greenhouse gas reduction, energy efficiency, and then responding to maybe local congestion on circuits or feeders. One thing too, I really want to point out in my work with communities, emphasize to me why this is important. Making flexibility needs to be the new renewable energy. It has to be so simple to understand. It has to be huggable like solar was huggable. We need intuitive user interfaces, affordable automation, and higher order rewards because the savings per person are not going to be a lot. So relating the message to something human that we discover in human-centered design as we build these solutions with our customers. And then last but not least, I just want to say co-creation in product offerings should be equitable, racially, gender, income, customer type. And those efforts should be intentional, early, and substantial, not just kind of an afterthought once we already have an idea and we want to do our thing, and then we're just looking for somebody to kind of test it and rubber stamp it. And then privacy and cybersecurity. So those are my last comments, and I'd love to hear people's thoughts on how we can push that forward.
Bruce, I unmuted you.
Yeah, hi, Tanya. This is Bruce Severance, Mitsubishi Electric. We've spoken before.
Hey, Bruce. Yeah.
How are you? So,
good, how are you?
Good, thank you. Despite the hair-raising election, you know, it's been a good week. So the question I have is, how have you already beta tested the software and hardware for this, or where are you in the actual development of the software and hardware, and has it already been tested on any one pilot project?
That's a great question. No, it is not, because as I'm sure you can understand, there are multiple complexities, and we wanted to take a fresh look at all of the components that have been tested and make sure that we're knitting them together in a way that's actually meeting a customer need and is going to do it at a price point that they can afford and with an amount of reliability that makes sense for not only where they are right now. And when I say right now, I think we're maybe a year or two to market. I don't know. So not only where they are right now, but where they will need to be. So let me answer your question directly. There are three core components. There's the IoT hub. I would say if anyone knows TRLs, we're looking at a TRL right now of 5 to 7. There are lots of IoT hubs commercially and readily available off-the-shelf sensors. Integrating all that stuff is still a little bit of a, I wouldn't say it's a one-size-fits-one, but a really big component of our technology roadmap is just like we did with solar installations, really dialing down the workflows for instrumenting, installing, commissioning, and connecting that IoT hub, taking some of the variability out of those installations and really focusing on the high impact elements of that we need for the most autonomous, occupant-friendly control. So I'd say IoT hub, TRL, 5 to 7. User interfaces, probably also TRL 5 to 7. Still testing those and testing the sort of value proposition. I'll show you some of the human-centered design stuff that we're doing in our early proof of concepts. I think you'll really be interested in that, and we're actively progressing that in our roadmap right now. The software stack is based on a software architecture that has been in use for transactive net zero energy communities in Europe since 2007. So there is a full software deployment that's been active in the field since mid-2000s. Code base needs refreshing. So we are looking at really updating, cleaning up, skinnying up, and improving the scalability of that software. Because again, a lot like the IoT hub, for example, if you have to code every single driver, that's not going to be economically feasible. We are trying to focus on customers that have pretty homogeneous building loads, so that when we create a physics-based model for how we think the HVAC is going to operate, we can feel pretty certain that they probably have one of a handful of different types of rooftop packaged units. For example, schools are a great example. They're pretty heterogeneous in the size and the types of HVAC as compared to, for example, Class A commercial buildings, which are much more heterogeneous and complex. So IoT hub, 5 to 7, user interfaces, 5 to 7, maybe closer to 5. Software package is actually quite mature, but we think it needs a rethink and a skinny down to commercialization. And then the algorithms are the earliest. So they have been tested in the lab with hardware in the loop at NREL and PNNL. They are now undergoing a limited field test for a neighborhood with 4 residential homes and some shared DERs. And we are looking to deploy them in a number of field demonstrations and mature the algorithms. I mean, data and machine learning is very iterative over the next 2 years. That's the part that requires the most development. So that was a long-winded answer, but I hope it covered every section of your question, Bruce.
What is the TRL? I'm sorry.
Of the entire package?
What is TRL? Can you define that for me? I'm sorry.
Technology readiness level. So a TRL, as defined by most of the research and development funding agencies from 1 to 10, explains its level of maturation from idea and research and development to a commercializable product. So a TRL of 5 is like you're halfway between sort of nascent technology and a VC fundable product. So we're about there. Like, we know there's a product use case. We've demonstrated that the technologies can work in the real world, in some cases in the lab, in others. And now we need to actually prove out some of the, when we knit them all together, prove out that value proposition, skinny down the workflows and the technology, and bring it closer to that TRL of 8 to 10, so that we can go after private financing and bring it to market at the price point that we need it to be at with the functionality we need.
Can I ask one other question?
Well, we have quite a few others, so let's take a couple.
That's fine.
Then we can come back. Okay, Bruce?
Bruce, email me.
All right, we're going to take one from Nehemiah. Do you plan to have an even more affordable price schedule for nonprofits focused on low-income multifamily housing?
I would love to. I mean, that was my first love when we started investigating this technology. Low-income housing in particular, we were hoping to use some of this technology in manufactured home, to test it in a number of different housing, not only multifamily, but rural low-income housing. Some of the difficulties, though, around the algorithmic development make it difficult. And then also on the pricing and the product side, there's this split incentive problem with the building owner versus the renter. And it created some complexity in the product development. So the next question we asked was, it doesn't seem feasible for us to start there, but we do want to be where you said, which is we want to be able to translate this technology to a number of different spaces. So what we said is, where can we make the most impact that is still hampered by affordability, but also at the scale where the technology that we'll introduce early can solve a problem they have right now and will continue to have at a price that they can afford. Our hope is, though, of course, to be able to bring this to any building that wants to affordably manage energy while decarbonizing.
We have a question from Alice Song. Alice, I've unmuted you. Do you want to unmute and ask your question, or would you like me to read it? Okay, I'll go ahead and read it. And
Hi,
I see
sorry.
you're unmuted. Go ahead. I can hear you.
Thanks. Great to see you this morning, Tanya.
Hi, Alice.
Hi. So, tough question. And thanks for this great presentation. I'm so such a fan and so interested in this, but We really need to find a school to beta test. Going back to your chart on the 4 uses, the electric, water, heating, lighting, EVs, and solar.
Sure.
What's the return on investment, or have you done that analysis if they've not done their decarb yet and they've only done, and they have really only lighting, they have no EVs, and negligible or no solar, and their water heating is gas?
You're looking at the decarbonization potential?
No, I'm looking on return on investment. Like you
Oh,
said,
okay.
there was 1 million. It was so fast I couldn't get it. $1 million or 1 million square feet, and then a savings of blah blah blah, and a payback in less than 2
Gotcha. Gotcha. This is based on, so a specific school district that we interviewed, this case study. And actually it's very funny because one of the schools that we did an interview with, I had worked with for years on a microgrid, and the facilities guy is named Glenn, and he's like, I said, yeah, that's you. So this is a situation where you've got the superintendent of business. She's got 1 million square feet to manage, $3 million energy bill.
When you say $3 million energy bill, is that gas and electric, or is that only the electricity portion?
Only the electricity portion.
Great.
Yeah. So that's why we're really focused on electrification too. It's going to be really difficult for us to. There are a couple things in the electrification realm that we're looking at. Number one is when you add more PV and more electric loads like electric vehicles. If you add electric vehicles and you add solar photovoltaics, and those solar photovoltaics are just dumping energy onto the grid at noon, and then you're heating empty classrooms and charging vehicles at whatever amperage you want all day long, that's a missed opportunity. And for the grid at large, you could, if everybody did that, we'd turn the duck curve into the giraffe curve,
Right. So I'm trying to define the ideal situation, because most of these schools have, as you well know, right, gas, water heating, gas heating, no solar or negligible, right? And they certainly don't have their EVs yet. So what is the return on investment?
20% of schools in California have solar.
Wants to reduce the carbon, but needs to actually show the business case.
20% of schools in California have solar, and they often have packaged rooftop units. So one of the first optimizations that we do is not on lighting, it's retrofitting controls and actuators on rooftop package units, and better coordinating heating and cooling in the building with occupancy and solar. So that way we can reduce demand charges. For example, we're not necessarily looking at water heating if they have a gas boiler, but for example, one project in Seattle that we're working with, they're just about to do a big retrofit. They're converting their gas boiler to electric. They're putting in electric water heat. Originally, they were going to do electric resistance. We argued for heat pump. They're putting on solar to meet all the standards of Seattle's, building energy standards. But they got a $75,000 upgrade bill because of the unconstrained solar backfeed impact and the impact of the increased electrical loads on the capacity for the load limits for their circuit. So we said, what if we worked with your utility to look at managing that better, and whether or not they'd be willing to consider modeling the capacity of the building differently. And so that's another part of the reason that we want to do some of these field demonstrations, is because as those loads that you're talking about, which are gas, electrify, which they will, we don't want that to then translate into a really large capacity upgrade bill for the customer. So again, we're a little bit ahead of the market here. We're trying to prove out that value. What we've shown though is that by better optimizing heating and cooling with solar, and if you have electric vehicles, not all schools have it, but some do. For example, the school district here has a fleet of 4 vehicles that they've used Prop 39 money to add solar and electric vehicles and do some energy efficiency and lighting. And there's enough savings there to get them anywhere from 5 to 25% of their energy bill in demand charge reductions and overall energy efficiency, while reducing carbon better self-consuming.
Right. And then back up on the 20% of schools have solar and they have RTUs. Those aren't all electric RTUs, heat pumps, in other words. Those are mostly gas. So even in those situations where they're gas, your system can actually reduce that, but it's minimal on the electrical side because it's a gas-fired RTU. True?
That would be correct in those cases. However, like I said, we believe electrification is coming, and it's better for us to take a small set of schools that qualify and to really prove out our technology. I mean, if you look at the Title 24 amendments for electrification, one of the classes of buildings that are included in those potential electrification mandates are the educational sector. So even though the rest of the commercial sector is not necessarily going to have to be subject to those requirements, education might. So, you know, we might as well get ahead of maturing the technology so that we can offer it at a price point that really does deliver this type of ROI.
Right. Okay. So let's continue this offline and let's find a case where we can, where the readiness is there and the technologies are in place so that we can optimize it and prove case in point. Thanks, Tanya.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Bruce, I've unmuted you. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks. Let's see, I had a fairly complicated question. I think kind of at the heart of it is looking at the duck curve and the availability of solar and renewables. There's a significant portion of the available energy that we need to shift to where the demand is, and you know, what proportion of that realignment do you think this technology can accomplish, factoring in projected EV fleets and optimal charging of those over the next 5 or 10 years? I mean, it's a complex question, you know, but do you have a sense if you're going to solve 10% of the grid harmonization problem or 20% of the grid harmonization problem? Is there any way to predict that?
Obviously, so, you know, I've been I've been on behalf of the Oregon Solar Energy Industry Association. I've been participating in resource adequacy proceedings recently for the Western Grid and, you know, tracking what's happening in the CAISO. It's a great question, and it's a very complex problem for our renewable portfolio, for our power plan in the Pacific Northwest. The modeling assumptions keep changing every, you know, okay, we had this load and this propensity assumption, and now the governor has mandated that all vehicles will be fully electric by 2035. So how does that change our load forecast? How does that? So I think that is something that I'm tracking and my team is tracking. But really the important part for us right now is, like Alice said, we need to find 2 or 3 customers that have a real problem right now, work out the kinks in our tech stack with anticipating some of the major changes that are happening, and try to quantify that and improve the model as we go. You know, one example that I like to give is when I started working in solar in 2002, and some of you on this I already know, and you probably have already heard this story, but when I started working on grid connected solar PV in the early 2000s, there was no NEMs, there was no ITC, so there were no real incentives, I mean RECs in some cases, for solar. It was considered a very fringe technology. We had to mature there was market transformation that had to happen there. And that's what has to happen. We're developing the technology as we're engaging with the customers. And so I think for me, we've done a lot of that broad survey stuff. I know the need is there and will be there. I don't know that we could quantify that right off the bat, because every time you model it, something in the fundamental assumptions changes. So I think that we need to just start maturing the technology and the use cases, ensure that there is this fit, and make sure that by the time the need is there, we have a technology that really works and it has technical depth. It's not just superficial, because by the time we need it, once we start to remove carbon from the grid and we've got these fixed resources that are less flexible, we're going to need loads to be a lot more flexible and reliably so. And having managed those sort of baskets of demand response, as well as comparing them to our power supply, we need more cost effectiveness and reliability from those technologies in order to keep it affordable for the all electricity users. So I didn't answer your question. I guess my answer is no. We're not modeling that right now. We've tried. It's too complicated. We really just want to mature the technology and keep following, come up with better and better forecasts, learn that data as we go. So thanks for the question, and I'm sorry that I didn't answer it.
Okay.
Okay, guys, I haven't gotten any more questions, but we still have about 12 more minutes, so there's still time. Do you have more questions for Tanya? Take advantage of this opportunity to ask her everything you've ever wanted to know, or you could ask her other things. Come on. Oh, Alice has another question.
Well, I'd actually like to ask folks on the call a question too. What areas do you think BDC, I mean, I feel like this group is pushing on a lot of these areas, but what innovations do you see coming in, not just enabling automation, which obviously is a thing that I'm particularly passionate about, but some of these packages of devices that are segmented by groups, or education and outreach or equity. I know one thing we're working on that I'd love to share is this customer segmentation, different than sort of mass market segmentation. One of the pilots that we're working on is taking 5 different commercial tariffs, looking at the load clustering by demographics and tariff, and from there, reaching out to commercial customers, asking if they'd like to participate in this research and development study. For those who consent, we match them with the tariff load shape that best approximates, we take 3 years of their baseline data, and then we match that load shape to our study clusters. And using the interfaces that I showed you in the demo, we go out and do field observation, and we interact. That's how that user is co-creating the product. We are looking at how they interact with those interfaces and what their stated preferences are, how their stated preferences interact with the actual physical devices that they have on site, and our observations of what that means in terms of their true flexibility profile. So creating a sort of, that's how we'll be creating our machine learning algorithm roadmaps, so that we're really optimizing based on what flexibility we think someone who answers questions in these ways and has these physical devices is likely to be able to offer back to the grid. So in improving our understanding of the customer and our representation of their interaction between their preferences and their the physics-based models of their device, we believe that we actually can have a much more, you can see here, it really shapes the control strategy of each device. So we're actively working on that on our proof of concept projects. And I would really love to hear from people what you think about that segmentation approach, and then how that relates to some of the broader trends in our industry.
So Tristan would like to know how much work needs to be done on the European software before it is ready.
I mean, for a single pilot, we could use it now. So it's absolutely ready to be used for a single location today. For scale, so bringing it to 700 customers, 100,000 customers at a price that they can afford and that will be affordable, we're probably, I don't know, I would say we want to mature the whole roadmap. So I'm going to say a year out, a year and a half, depending on how the pilots go.
Follow-up question, what can it do now?
What can it do now?
Mm-hmm.
It can do something pretty cool. So it can take a dynamic price in real-time increments, 5, 15 hour. That price can be comprised of a few different layers. We're actually working on this in a pilot in the Pacific Northwest. The bottom layer could represent, and each utility, so we have 4 utilities in our pilot. Each utility is a node it constitutes a node, and then they'll have a package of services that represent things that can respond to their nodal price. Their nodal price will have a baseline price that covers, it's sort of like what our T&D charges cover now. That base price as part of the hourly price at the end of the day looks like a volumetric or a T&D price. It's a set price. Some of them may add a market, a wholesale, dynamic wholesale component to that hourly price. Some may add a circuit congestion price. If they did load forecasting on a particular piece of infrastructure and want to incentivize people staying below load limits. And then some will have critical peak pricing, which is a lot like a DR. It's like a time of use price or DR. So they would maybe for 4 hours, 5 times per season, put this additional increment of cost. So each one can put a different value in those buckets. But to the end user's automated devices, what the software can do now is it sees that price in 5, 15, or hourly increments, and it responds, it takes the user's preferences, and then it controls the devices to try to reach some sort of optimum between the objectives of the user and what the utility is trying to achieve through those prices. So that's what it can do now.
Cool. Okay, Alice.
Price in there too, sorry. There's a GHG component in there. So if you want people to reduce consumption when there's high carbon on the grid, you would put into that price stack, utilities are putting a really large price component. That's currently being done in the wholesale market in California. And then if you want people to consume a lot of energy, you would put a negative price in that would stimulate the user to use more energy at that time. Okay, sorry about that, Ashley. Didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna let Alice have the floor.
Thanks so much. Follow-up question. Can you, and maybe if you haven't figured this out, that's okay. We can talk offline. But if you know now, what is the, describe your ideal conditions for your R&D, for your research to actually prove your concept in a public school in California. And I'm saying, like, you want them to be as decarbonized as possible, or is it okay that they, don't have solar, or you want a certain amount of solar, you need a Z&E building? What are the conditions that you're looking to test? And are you actually looking to test for returns on that optimal conditions, right, to best utilize your software versus the norm conditions, which probably don't have that, electricity is all lighting and electronics.
Right. And again, we're looking to solve an early problem, but also with a technology that can be scalable. So I think one thing that a lot of energy technology companies do that, I have 20 years of technology commercialization and market transformation experience. They try to do too much, and they take every single pilot without thinking about how that impacts their product roadmap. They generate a lot of technical debt by developing products that are not scalable. So we're really trying to say, look, here's a group that we think will have to decarbonize early with very little money. There are already 20% of schools in the Southwest of the United States already have solar on the rooftop. So yes, your question was, what's our ideal? A school district would be great. A large commercial, a church could be good, a city hall, a portfolio of municipal buildings that tend to have low sophistication in their building automation, and potentially a lot of electric loads. So they have very unoptimized loads in their building is what we're really looking for right now. Solar helps because we can do some shifting and reduce demand charges too, so that has an immediate payback on their bill. But we're looking for big square footage, cavernous rooms, badly optimized, and so that we can, and probably solar, so that we can better match, those loads that we do have access to with some of that solar production until we mature the technology and can really start slicing into some of those things that are way more complex, like, I think you brought up lighting. That can be a very complicated load to optimize.
Okay. Does battery storage come into play? Like if you had your preferences, in lieu of EV?
Absolutely. you know, anything that can be used as storage is always helpful, whether that's a water heater with CT 2045, you know, whether that's a heat pump heating, whether that's EVs, anything that has inherent flexibility. And again, that's why we're picking these sort of middle market employers, because they tend to have a lot of flexibility because they don't already have controls logic that's really squeezing out all of the possible efficiency and flexibility in the building. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Okay, Tristan has another follow-up question. Where do you get the GHG data?
That's a good question. So obviously in California, you've got the SCHIP watt time API. And, you know, for most of us, that's going to be our best bet for now. So that's another reason why I can't remember if it was you or if it was Bruce who asked about, you know, how we're quantifying this at scale. You know, so much of what we're looking at, the metrics just need to get better, because a lot of times too, that GHG, I know they have like a nodal GHG value, but I got into this really wonky discussion with a lot of energy nerds on Twitter about like, how do they come up with that anyway? Like, so I think you know, we keep tabs on what's happening in the labs, the national labs, the research community, you know, looking at how the CEC, what the innovators in that modeling are doing, and just trying to keep tabs on it. But good question. Thanks, Tristan.
All right, I think we're going to call that our time, and we're going to say a huge thank you to Tanya for your time, for the presentation. Thank you to all of you for joining us, for taking an hour out of the chaos of the world and for joining us. It's been a wonderful hour, and we hope to see you all on more of our calls, and we hope that any of you that aren't members will join us. This is my last pitch for membership. And thank you, Tanya, for your ringing endorsement of BDC and for becoming members. We really hope you'll all join us, and we're passionate about what we're doing, and we think that if we all work together, we can really achieve something great. So thank you. Let's hope that we all have a great day, guys, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you, everyone.